What's your plan for the day?
The usual. Hello?
Grandma,
Danny? You sound so strange.
I'm in jail.
Oh, my God.
Mail $10,000 to this address.
$10,000?
How did you think this was real?
Mom, you thought it was real too.
Oh my God. She was very convincing.
Well, she was scared, your mother. We were all scared.
I wasn't quite as scared, just for the record.
You gotta tell the police. They're no use.
They contact people at random using telephone listings and social networking sites.
Like Facebook?
Sure, by Facebook.
Well, shouldn't Zuckerberg be able to fix this? What about my money? Am I supposed to just let them have it?
I'm gonna get it back.
I need a ride.
My mother is at large.
Why are we stopping at malls?
To get a gun?
Do you even know how to use it?
How hard can it be? Idiots use them all the time.
God.
Things happen to people as they age. Weird, crazy things.
We're old, diminished. The least we can do is take care of each other.
She's a tough cookie.
When she sets her mind to something, there's no stopping her.
My grandson's parked a block away. I don't have much time.
You left your grandson in the car?
But he's 24. We all have our good days and our bad days.
And what's today?
We'll find out.
Grandma?
Hello?
No, sorry. I'm just looking for my grandma. Sorry.
Hello there, Richard the Film Geek here, and I'm here to give you guys my review of the 2024 American indie comedy drama Thelma, which was named within the National Board of Review's Top 10 Independent Films of the Year, was written, edited, and directed for the first time by Josh Margolin, and stars June Squibb rather impressively in her very first leading role at 94 years of age. The legendary John Shaft and Mr. Kwame from George of the Jungle himself, Richard Roundtree, in his final big screen performance before his sad passing 2 years ago, as well as Fred Heckinger, Parker Posey, Clark Gregg, and Malcolm McDowell. Basically self-described as Mission Impossible if Tom Cruise's Ethan Hunt was an elderly grandmother, and actually loosely inspired by a real-life incident that happened to the director's own namesake 103-year-old grandmother. The story of Thelma is about a 93-year-old widowed grandmother named Thelma Post, played by June Squibb, who lives on her own in a small flat, surprisingly capable of taking care of herself despite natural concerns from her daughter and son-in-law, played by Parker Posey and Clark Gregg respectively, about her age, and has an extremely sweet and loving relationship with her Gen Z slacker grandson Daniel, played by Fred Heckinger. One day, she gets duped out of $10,000 by a scam artist on the phone, pretending to be Daniel, who's apparently in jail for a little hit and run, when in reality, he was asleep the entire time. She goes to the police, only for them to prove pretty damn useless and ineffective anyway. She then decides to take matters into her own wrinkly hands, inspired by Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible Fallout, instead of allow her humiliation to get to her and allow her family to consider taking her to a care home. She reunites with her estranged best friend Ben, played by Richard Roundtree, who himself is due to perform as Daddy Warbucks in a special care home stage production of Annie, borrows his mobility scooter, and they both set off on a treacherous action movie style quest across LA to help Thelma get her money back, as well as get her revenge on the scummy scam artists who took advantage of her and conned her in the first place. So now that I've recently watched this movie for the first time, here are my thoughts on Thelma. I'm actually genuinely shocked that at least up till recently, I'd never once heard about this movie at all last year. And I really can't help but get the feeling that this was either A, because the hype train at the time for Deadpool and Wolverine was so insanely off the charts, and to be fair, that movie turned out to be fucking awesome anyway, as we all know, or B, because the marketing for this movie was frankly pretty terrible, or C, simply because audiences in general themselves failed this movie because they either never heard much about it and or even refused to go out and see it in the cinema, because rather than go out and see a small-scale independent film like this that has the feel of a conventional blockbuster action movie without even going out of its way to be a conventional blockbuster action movie, wears its heart on its sleeve, feels unique, fresh, creative and original, is clearly made with so much heart, care and passion put into it, and actually has a strong, poignant, relatable and thought-provoking central message about how we shouldn't really take our elders too much for granted and instead spend as much treasured time as we can with them before they're eventually no longer with us, in a way that doesn't talk down to the elderly in general or come across as too cloying, preachy or annoying. They'd very much rather go see yet another franchise movie or a sequel or a remake or a reboot, something along the lines of not just Deadpool and Wolverine, but also, say, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, or the 25th anniversary reissue of Phantom Menace, or Inside Out 2, or even Despicable Me 4, hence obviously why we still sadly have to put up with nothing but unoriginality and creative bankruptcy coming from Hollywood today. Yeah, that's all squarely on you guys for having the hypocritical attention spans of goldfish, because you're the ones who keep screaming to the rooftops and or here on YouTube or social media about wanting more original movies, and yet whenever said original movies do come out, you still don't bother to go out and freaking see them anyway, hence why they keep bombing and or at least underperforming at the box office needlessly. So really at this point, you guys get what you fucking deserve at the end of the day. Now that that little slightly off-topic mini-rant is over, for which I do apologise, but it really needed to be said, I bring this up because despite admittedly never having heard about this movie at first myself, I was actually pretty darn excited to see how a small indie action comedy with a female nonagenarian in the lead, as opposed to a Liam Neeson or a Jason Statham or even a Dwayne Johnson was going to turn out. And I'm very happy to report that I came out of my local screening with the biggest heartwarming smile on my face. In other words, even though it's not quite perfect, and it has a few character flaws here and there in terms of how some of them are written, as well as some slight pacing issues, which I'll very briefly address a bit later on in the review, I still surprisingly love Thelma. I genuinely think it is one of the most criminally underrated movies to come out of last year. And I also feel like this movie was made directly for people like me. Like, I happened to see it in just the perfect time in my life, especially as my maternal grandmother, who, let's just say, I didn't really get to know all that well, and actually kind of do wish in hindsight that I'd have spent a bit more precious time with before long, sadly passed away, aged 93, the exact same age as Thelma in this movie. The performances across the board are near flawless. The only two obvious standouts here being our geriatric leads, June Squibb and Richard Roundtree. Starting off first of all with June Squibb, who probably gives by far not just one of, if not the most criminally underrated female performance of 2024 here, but easily one of the very best performances of her already legendary career, right next to her Academy Award nominated supporting performance in 2013's Nebraska. Her natural comedic timing is excellent. The way she treats these otherwise seemingly mundane and small-scale everyday situations she gets up to throughout the movie, like their literal action set pieces from a Mission Impossible movie, as well as her stubbornness and confidence wants to never let her age and or her physical limitations hinder her mission is just brilliant and easily provides some of the funniest and most ridiculously laugh-out-loud moments in the movie. Her chemistry with Richard Roundtree is electric to watch on screen. You can really tell these two legends had such a ton of fun working together. And even her chemistry with Fred Heckinger is very sweet, sincere, touching, and profoundly relatable to anyone who ever had or ever has a loving relationship with their grandparents. And it actually profoundly disappoints me that the Academy seems to have greatly missed an opportunity here to finally give this lady a Best Actress nomination. I mean, the fact that it's taken June Squibb this long into her career to finally get a leading role like this in her mid-90s is wild. Just such a positively bonkers yet remarkable achievement for an actress of her age, to say the very least. As for the second standout performance in this movie, if you couldn't already tell from the way I opened this video, what else really can I say other than rest in peace, Richard Roundtree. This was just such a lovely, moving, delightful, and above all, touching performance for you to cap off such an iconic career. I particularly love his thought-provoking monologue in the movie to Thelma about the inevitability of aging, and that the more we age over time, the more we mostly become less of who we once were. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if that monologue isn't just down to the writing, but also came from Richard's own heart and soul, especially given the rather sad context of his struggles with cancer during the shoot, which, by the way, on a very brief side note, fuck that disease for taking him away maybe a couple of years too soon. And it also makes me all the more profoundly disappointed in the Academy that this literal legend wasn't given at least a posthumous nomination for supporting actor, because if anyone was roundly deserving of such a nomination, or even a Lifetime Achievement Award this year, it would almost certainly, definitely be Richard Roundtree, hands down. Fred Heckinger, I have to say, has been on quite the roll these last few years, and really proven himself to be a surprisingly good, impressive young actor, with roles in Season 1 of The White Lotus, as well as Nickel Boys, 8th Grade, the Netflix Fear Street trilogy, Woman in the Window, and especially Gladiator 2 last year, with the only blemish so far being last year's Kraven the Hunter. And I thought he did a really good job here as the grandson Danny, who's very sweet-natured, really likeable, adorably affable, Dowell rocks the Kurt Cobain hairstyle really well, and obviously adores and looks up to his grandmother Thelma very much. But he's kind of a directionless slacker who, like his grandmother, feels like he has no real control over his own life, and has thus completely lost his own sense of self-worth, as well as confidence in his own abilities and his own individual independence, as an obvious result of the constant nagging pressure his parents put him under. And I really love that the character journeys here of both Thelma and Danny just perfectly mirror each other, and thus that it's their relationship alone that drives this movie. As far as I'm aware, Malcolm McDowell only features in the climax, and thus isn't really in the movie as much as I probably expected him to. But regardless, he's clearly having a ton of fun, relishing the part of this scummy but really motiveless, sad and pathetic villain. And it actually feels like a filmmaker's dream to have John Shaft and Alex DeLarge, two of the most iconic anti-heroes in 70s cinema history, share the screen alongside June Squibb in one ridiculously tension-filled yet small-scale climactic sequence. The only two weak links within this cast I have to point out, though, are Parker Posey and Clark Gregg as the parents. Not that they give bad performances in the movie per se, don't get me wrong. They are pretty good, and of course I know they've both done far better projects, Clark Gregg especially with his memorable role as Agent Coulson in the MCU. But it's actually more to do with the fact that their characters feel pretty underused and are just reduced to the walking cliche of the constantly worrying, panicky, pushy, and overbearing parents, which isn't at all always a bad thing. It also doesn't really help that they go slightly OTT with their performances and act more like 90s sitcom characters most of the time. Josh Margolin makes a terrific first impression with his directorial debut here. If you happened to stay to watch the mid-credits scene featuring Josh's real-life grandmother, who again is also named Thelma Post, it becomes really easy to tell how much of a true passion project and labour of love this was for him, as well as how much he really seems to love watching action movies like Mission Impossible with his grandmother, fantastically evidenced by the opening, where you briefly see Thelma and Danny watching Mission Impossible Fallout together. The score that Nick Schuber does for this movie is just badass and really owes a huge debt to Lalo Schifrin, the legendary composer of the original Mission Impossible theme tune. In terms of pacing issues that I may have with this film, it feels a tad too long in places, and I just really wish they perhaps could have trimmed maybe 10 or so minutes out of the runtime, particularly within the middle half. In conclusion, I had such a genuine blast with Thelma. It again left me with the hugest heartwarming smile on my face from beginning to end. It directly spoke to me on such a profound, deep, and emotional level that I never truly expected or even thought was possible from a small-scale independent movie like this. I must really stress and reiterate that it is such a crime that this movie didn't do as well at the box office as it probably deserved to. And thus it is a shame that this criminally underrated gem seemed to go completely under audiences' radar last year. So even if you're someone who has, or in my personal case, had a close relationship with your grandparents, if you're into action movies, and or if you're interested in seeing what a fun and entertaining elderly woman's version of Mission Impossible looks like, then I highly recommend that you give this movie the shot it was needlessly denied at the box office. Give it more of the attention it truly deserves, and check it out whenever you have the chance. And with all that being said, my overall rating for Thelma is going to be a strong 9 out of 10. Don't forget to do the following few things as always. Leave a comment below. Let me know your thoughts on Thelma. Subscribe to my channel. Click on the little bell to receive any emailed notifications and or updates from my channel. If you haven't already, you can also follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Letterboxd, and Blue Sky. Do take care, everyone. And to quote Thelma herself towards the end of the movie, this whole thing has been really ridiculous.
Like Facebook?
Sure, by Facebook.
Well, shouldn't Zuckerberg be able to fix this?